Well, I don't have to lean on the pulpit today, so feeling a lot better. So appreciate the thoughts and prayers. I got a bunch of tests yet to do and things to go through. Just want to figure out if there's anything underlying that was part of what happened last week. So just appreciate your prayers and support with that, as always. And if you pray half as much as you did for Sandy, I'm sure it's going to come out just fine for me. So. Well, happy Father's Day. This is a scripture. A long time ago, I thought this would make a great Father's Day lesson. So you're getting this, and I hope you'll agree it's a great Father's Day lesson. It causes us to praise our Heavenly Father. But this is a verse, I had told you about this before. I've got a collection of verses that I try to spend some time with. And this is a particular verse that's on a ring of verses that sits on my office desk. And they're just a collection of verses that are specific to some challenges and things that I just need to stay on top of my life. And this is one of those verses. And it's, those of you who are familiar with 1st and 2nd Kings, you might recognize who this is that's talking, but this is a father's farewell, and it's David talking to his son Solomon. Two very interesting and amazing and unique characters in God's kingdom. But before we read that, as we celebrate Father's Day and as we think about that. Dads, that's kind of a big deal, isn't it? When we think about advice that we give to our children and what we would say to them and the things that we want to teach them. But this is a little unique in the sense that this is a father who's dying, okay? And so he is dealing with this idea of, I've got very limited and maybe only one more chance to say something, to make an impression on my boy. And so when you think about that, what is it if that was you on your deathbed? What is it that you would want to say to your son or daughter? What are those last words? And you think about that, that's kind of a challenging thing. Although I think most of us would probably have a pretty good idea. And isn't it the idea that what's the most important thing? What's the most important thing that I can say to support, encourage, prepare my child to continue in this world without a father anymore, right? And that's kind of a big deal, right? Kind of a big deal. And so this is what David came up with for his last words. And I don't know if these are definitely his last words, but certainly one of the last words that he spoke to his son Solomon. And it says here, I'm about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong. Be strong. Doesn't that sound like that macho thing that a father would say to his son? And I don't mean macho in a negative way at all. This macho-ness. I mean, it's the way God created us, right? And all of us guys, we've got it, right? We do, that competitive spirit. I mean, if you don't believe it, just go back and think about some of those conversations you heard between us boys trash talking while we were playing hearts. Even in hearts, man, we bring the macho-ness, we want to win. We want to be the best. Not because we want to beat you down, but it's just the way us guys are wired. And you ladies don't get that. You don't understand that, unless maybe you're Caitlin Clark, and there's not a lot of those around, right? Right? But, so it just, be strong and show yourself a man. And that's what really stood out to me about this. Be strong and show yourself a man and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. And as I said, this was the statement that stood out to me. Be strong and show yourself a man. So we're going to dig into these couple of verses for our Father's Day message today, and just really look at what this father is saying to his son. And I want you to realize this too. This is a blueprint for life. So ladies, it's not just a guy thing today, okay? So you can't check out just because it's Father's Day. Because the lesson that David teaches to his son Solomon is worthy of teaching to all people, okay? And so maybe if you need to think of it, it says when it says be a man, show yourself to be a man. Think about it in the context, and we'll see this, that I believe David truly meant it. Think about yourself, show yourself to be a godly person, okay? Show yourself to be a godly person. But realize the context here is a father talking to a son. So let's jump right into it. So the first statement in that was be strong. And I think we need to realize here, and I don't think this is a big stretch for us at all. We're not talking about muscular strength here at all. Although I think these two men probably represented that physically in their life, but that isn't what was important. That isn't the message that this dying father wanted to leave to his son. It was not about physical power or dominance, but it was about an inner strength. An inner strength. And let's just be honest, when we think about our macho-ness, guys, we often do think about the physical side of that. But you know what? It's the inner stuff that's harder. It's the inner stuff. It's what makes this, and what causes the thoughts that run through our mind. That's where the real challenges are. And this father is saying that's where you need to apply your strength, okay? The kind that holds steady when circumstances shift. One of the words that you'll see in the notes here is this idea of consistency, okay? He's saying to his boy, be consistent, but be consistent about the right things, okay? Be consistent about godly things. Strength in this sense is not about being loud, again, as I'm saying already. It's about being consistent, somebody that you can count on. Now, sometimes people are consistently bad, aren't they? And you can count on that. Of course, he's not talking about that, but about being consistently focused, those kinds of things. Quiet resolve to stand with God, all right? It takes a strong man, a strong person to stand up to the world. Giving in really is easy. I'm just going to give you some advice. If you're struggling with temptation, just give in. It'll go away. For that moment, okay? For that moment. Now, I hope you're paying attention. That's not really what I'm suggesting that you do. But what I said is true. You want temptation to go away, just give in. That's easy. But this father's reminding his son, it says, you gotta be strong in the fact that you fight the fight always, okay? You're consistent about it. And we know that from our study of Satan in months past that, if we stand up to the devil, he'll do what? He'll flee, okay? And so, David is wanting his son to fight that fight consistently, and that too will take care of temptation, okay? It will. And it will do it in such a way that maybe things that once tempted you don't tempt you anymore. And that's a pretty nice place to be in. That's a pretty nice place to land. Identity through proven action. He says, be strong and show yourself a man. What's the most important word in that statement up there? Show. Show. Right? It's the idea of, reveal to yourself, to the world, who and what you are. And of course, our actions do that every moment. Every moment our actions are doing that. Character is not declared, but it's demonstrated, How many times have you heard people talk about how great they are, but when you look at their actions, it speaks nothing to that, right? Right? The bragging and things like that, character. It's not declared, it's demonstrated. And so the father David reminds his son Solomon, don't just talk about it. Don't just talk about it. Do it. Don't just talk about it. Don't just think about it. Do it, all right? And again, it's that idea of doing it consistently. Doing it consistently. And I love, too, he makes it very clear as he goes on in the text, this is what you need to show. This is what you need to do. You need to keep the charge of the Lord. You need to be walking in his ways, and you need to keep his statutes. And there's one word that pulls this all together, binds this all together, and it's the word obedience. Be obedient. Live the life of a godly person, okay? Live the life of a godly person. Our identity is shaped less by what we claim and more by what we consistently practice. What we consistently practice. I want to back up here. I want you to think about something. Consistently practice. Here's God, okay? Let's do it this way. Here's God. And here's you or me, okay? And I want you to just think about, what's this represent? God, me. I mean, what's that represent? Being close to God, okay? Okay, you can't read my mind. Kathy thinks she can, but being close to God, right? Satan is really, really good at getting us to move in small steps, okay? And this works in both ways. Satan doesn't need us to just throw down and walk away from God. Satan doesn't even need us to change our name. We can keep calling ourselves Christian. Satan doesn't need us to stop reading our Bible. Satan doesn't need us to stop praying. So what he does is he does need us to move farther away from God. Okay? And so Satan will send little things in our life that just cause us to move a little bit. Okay? Did you see that? It was just a little bit. The point is, you probably didn't see it because it was just a little bit. And a little bit more. And a little bit more. And a little bit more. Just a little bit. Just a little bit more. And a little bit more. You figured this out yet? And a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Now, I want you to think about this. What's this person realize? Nothing. Okay? This person realizes nothing yet. Why? Well, they can still see God. They're going to church. They're reading their Bibles. They're praying. They're serving. And then a little bit. And a little bit. A little bit more. Just a little bit more. You see, part of what's happening here, though, is it's very gradual, and it's not noticed. But I want to ask you a question. You're pretty smart. You'll get this. Is the relationship this person have with God the same as this person? It's vastly different. But this person doesn't know any better. It goes just a little bit more. And my fear is often, because of the lack of consistency, at what point does this person become so far away? Now, the answer to that, you can never be far enough away that God can't save you. But at what point are you far enough away you don't care anymore? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. You see, that's why that word consistently is so important. And I want us to think about that. If our fathers were saying that to us, could we respond to him? Yeah, I'm being consistent, Dad. And what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? It means I'm doing the things that well, let's back up there. Consistently keeping the charge of the Lord, consistently walking his ways, consistently keeping his statutes. Now, does consistently mean perfect? No. No. But it's about a trend line. In my life right now, am I walking more away from God or am I walking more toward God? What's the trend in your life? Are you consistently doing this or not consistently doing it? You see, like I said a moment ago, it works. It works both ways, okay? It works both ways. All right, I think that's where I left off. Did we do that one? Yeah. All right. Obedience. You know, all of those things that David is saying to Solomon are wrapped up in being obedient, okay? In every way that God calls us to be. And he says here, the point here is if you'll do this, if you'll be consistent, son, if you'll be obedient, son, your life will prosper. Now, we need to make sure we don't understand this as a lot of teaching teaches this, what we call this prosperity gospel. This idea that if you are a faithful child, obedient child of God, you're going to have money. That's what the prosperity gospel is all about, having more stuff. Do you think that's what David was saying to his son? Even though Solomon was the guy who had all the stuff, that isn't what it was about. That isn't what it was about. The prosperity here means living aligned with God's design, where your life has purpose, direction, and lasting impact that's defined by God, not the world. Not the world, okay? Obedience doesn't eliminate difficulty, but it creates an anchor in our lives. It creates an anchor in our lives that's so important. And it allows us, if we make that choice, to have that consistency of moving toward God, closer to God as opposed to away from him. Faithfulness is comprehensive too, and I think that's something else that David wanted his son to know. And isn't this so New Testament? With all your heart and with all your soul, right? That message is so powerful, and it's not just in the New Testament, it's in the Old Testament as well, to love God with all of us. You know, it's not that, and unfortunately a lot of people do this. Life is kind of organized in departments. And there's this God department. Well, God's name shouldn't be on only one of the rooms in that store. It should be the name of the store, if you will. Okay? That's about loving God with all your heart and your soul. It's not partial commitment. It's not Sunday-only devotion. It's whole life orientation to God. In other words, everything about us should connect us to God or point to God, okay? Faithfulness shows up in decisions, relationships, priorities, and even in private thoughts. It's not perfection, as we've already said, but it is persistence in the right direction. Persistence in the right direction. A legacy worth passing on. You see, David isn't just concerned about Solomon's success. He's thinking about all the other people he's a father to as well. And I think so much more than that. But he's looking ahead to the future, isn't he? I think he absolutely is, okay? Okay, here, I love to do this. I love to give you things to think about, to assess your own life. And this is where that starts this morning. So how will the chapter that you're writing right now influence others? In fact, do we ever think about that? About the influence that we have? Because we do. But is it positive or negative? Okay? And we need to be more intentional about that. And David is being very intentional in having this conversation with his son. But I want you to think about that. How is your life? How is your life affecting the lives of your family, your children, your neighbors, your co-workers? How is it affecting them? Is it a source of blessing for them? Or is it like, boy, I sure hope doesn't start talking about church again or whatever. Okay? Years ago, I don't remember how long ago, but right here in this congregation, in fact, the conversation took place right over here. There was a young couple that were visiting us, and I forget the reason why they were visiting, but they were newly married. And you know how it is when we have visitors. We get so excited that, maybe somebody's coming to join us. And, I'm just visiting. It's like, oh, okay. We're so glad you're here. and of course we are. I jest. But as I'm talking to this young man, and he's sharing a story that they're newly married, and when they got married, he and his new wife, were very serious and committed to the idea that religion was important to them, that going to church was important to them, but they didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to go. They didn't necessarily have, strong examples in their family, except for one. So I asked him the question. I said, well, how did you come upon selecting or choosing the Church of Christ then? He said, because of my grandfather. He said, I got talking with my wife, and I just realized how significant and important my grandfather was to me. In fact, he's probably the best person that I know, and I love him so much. Great example, great encourager. And he went to the Church of Christ. So he said, the decision was made. The decision was made. If this man that I love more than any other man, who has been the best example in my life more than any other man, if the Church of Christ was good enough for him, we didn't even have to discuss it. That's what we did. And I remember thinking to myself, like I said, this was years ago. I don't remember how many years ago, but that story impressed me. And it caused me to think, will I have that kind of influence on people? Will my example be consistent enough, persistent enough? Will my love for God be spoken in the things that I show? Not that I say, but that I show. Of course, what I say is important too, but, keeping it in the context of what David was saying to Solomon. Show yourself a man. Show yourself a Christian. An example worth following. Am I that? Every act of obedience or disobedience lays a foundation for those who come after. David's final words cut through the chaos of life. And just to sum it up, what he said to his son, he said, be strong, live with integrity, and stay faithful to God. It's pretty good advice. And David knew that if his son followed that advice, that he would prosper and that he would leave this world with hope. Now, it's interesting. Both David and Solomon were not perfect men by any means. In fact, their list of sins is pretty impressive, quite honestly. But I think in that lies the fact that even though the world got the best of them sometimes, their ego got the best of them sometimes, their selfishness got the best of them sometimes, they could still be considered godly men. And when you think about the words that are recorded by these men in our Bibles today, well, we know how God feels about them, okay? So take some hope in that we don't have to be perfect in this process, but we come back to this word, persistent. Which direction are you moving? Closer to God or farther away from God? I came across this question, and I know when you read it, it's like, ooh, that's a little harsh. That's a little hard, Rudy. Get off my feet. You're a big boy, Rudy. That hurts. But this is my assessment question, okay? And I'm asking myself this, of course. Of course, these sermons I preach get preached to Rudy first. But does anyone want to be like you? You can ask yourself that. And of course, maybe the real punch here is, how about our own children? And we need to ask ourselves, maybe we haven't been the best example. Maybe we haven't said the best things. Maybe we made some big mistakes more often than we should have. Okay. So, can you change it? That's what I want us to hear today, dads. If you haven't been the dad that maybe you should have been, it's not too late. I was having that conversation with somebody yesterday. Just because your kids are adults living on their own, do you stop being a dad or a mom? No. In fact, it gets harder, doesn't it? Oh my. I thought 18, I'm done. I'm done. Get out of here. Have some money again, Doesn't work that way. Not even close. And that's okay, right? That's okay. I love having relationships with my adult children. It's a unique, interesting, challenging, beautiful time of life. It truly is. But beyond our kids, are we an example that anybody wants to follow? And maybe it's because we haven't showed ourselves like we should have. Okay? It's time to be a man. Time to be a Christian. Now, I want to get back to this illustration here, okay? So maybe today, in your honest assessment, you realize here's God and you're here. Okay. Is it possible to just go like this? Probably not. Probably not. Maybe you could come up with some examples. But usually what this represents is such dramatic and dynamic change that it's not sustainable. Okay? I get emails from a gentleman. His name's Ben Azadi, and that may not mean anything to you, but he's into nutrition and different things about trying to eat better. If you want to learn about fasting, Ben Azadi, we've talked about fasting, is a great resource for that. But what I love about Ben is I get a weekly email from him that simply says, okay, this week, all I need you to do, this week, all I need you to do is this. And then next week I get another email. This week, all I need you to do is this. Now, I realize this isn't spiritual things, but I think you can make the connection here. And then the next week, I get another email that says this. And then the next week, boom, okay, you get the point. And his whole idea is, yeah, you got some big changes you need to make in your life, but the way you're going to do that is just a little bit at a time. And the beauty and the value behind that is that little step I can do. And I can do it pretty good. I mean, it's easy. So I want us to think about that in a spiritual context. If spiritually you realize you're not where you need to be with God, I simply want to ask you today, what is the little thing you need to do Dads, if I've challenged you today and you realize you're not the dad you need to be, do not walk out of here depressed and discouraged. Walk out of here hearing what I'm saying right now. What is that little thing you need to do to move closer? Whether it's closer to God or closer to your child. Maybe repairing a relationship. That little thing that you can do. And that little thing that when you do it and you accomplish it, it makes you stronger and it gives you the ability to be able to do the next little thing. And pretty soon, it's looking like this again. You see, we will please our God when we are moving in the right direction. Okay? When we're moving in that right direction. So it's time to be somebody that's worth following, okay? Our children deserve that, don't they? Don't they? I don't care how many trials and tribulations your child has put you through, and some of us have a list, don't we? But they still deserve our best. They still deserve our best. So fathers or anybody else here, if you realize your relationship isn't what it should be with God, what little thing could you do right now? What little thing could you do today? What little thing could you commit to accomplishing this week that brings you closer to God and maybe closer in a relationship that you're struggling with? And maybe that little thing is coming forward today and just asking for prayers, asking for help. Won't you come forward today and let us love you while we stand and sing this song of encouragement?